A school was hit by a major fire, and the principal managed to lead out all the children he could see. The fire had already engulfed the entire building. Firefighters conducted a floor-by-floor search and quickly found a survivor.
They're trapped in the common room!
All right, get out of here!
They kicked the door open, and several people were lying on the ground, too scared to move. They immediately escorted them out.
You have 1 minute. 1 minute!
Copy that, Chief!
He entered another room, checking under the desk, on the bed, even under the bed. After carefully searching and confirming no one was left inside, he stepped out of the room. They led the rescued students outside and reported that the search was complete. The chief ordered everyone to evacuate. But in the last room, they found a student trying to save himself, stuck in the window frame. His abdomen had been cut by glass, and he had already passed out. The firefighters carried him out, but suddenly the fire engulfed the entire corridor, and they lost contact. The chief kept calling from outside, but there was no response. Everyone's heart was in their throat. At the critical moment, a large hand pushed open the door.
Top floor's all clear, Chief!
Everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. The student was placed on a stretcher and rushed to the hospital.
Lacerations to the abdomen. Glass is still inside the wound.
Fire up the water cannons!
A burned boy was lying under a bed when suddenly his finger moved.
He's alive!
After the firefighters had evacuated all personnel, they began a full-scale firefighting operation. From night until morning, the fire was finally extinguished. The chief ordered another thorough search of the building. At that moment, the firefighters discovered this horrifying scene.
He's alive!
The firefighters quickly carried the boy out and watched him being rushed into the ambulance.
I swept that room, Chief.
He fell into deep self-blame. Although the chief tried to comfort him and tell him to let it go, he could not forgive himself for a long time afterward. He later visited the boy in the hospital and saw him wrapped in bandages like a mummy, which filled him with sadness. A grown man even had tears in his eyes.
Excuse me. Any word on this patient? I was one of the firemen.
He's critical. We're not hopeful.
Okay. Do you know how old he is?
10.
In fact, he had already done his job, and firefighters are not saints. So in the end, who should be responsible for the consequences of this accident? A steak was frying in a pan while the TV was on, but the house was completely empty. This caused the steak to catch fire. Firefighters were confused about where the owner had gone. A neighbor said they had heard the homeowner talking on the phone about an hour earlier, but the signal inside the building was very poor, so he usually went up to the roof to make calls. However, after a long search on the rooftop, the firefighters still couldn't find him. Just as they were about to go back downstairs, they heard a faint cry for help.
You hear that? Fire department, call out!
Over here!
Fire department, call out!
Down here!
Where is this guy?
Help! I'm stuck! Down here!
Inside an extremely narrow gap between two buildings, a man was stuck sitting, folded up with his butt on the ground. The cramped position looked almost comical. The firefighters looked at the impossible situation and could only try to break through the wall from inside the building to rescue him. They measured his approximate location and sent him a mask and a radio through a rope to keep him updated and prevent dust from entering his lungs during drilling. But his breathing was getting weaker, likely due to compression syndrome caused by being trapped for too long. If they couldn't get him out within 5 minutes, his survival chance would drop to about 50%. The man said he was tired and wanted to sleep. Knowing he liked watching fighting sports, the firefighters deliberately insulted his favorite fighter.
Yeah, too bad he got his ass kicked by St. Pierre.
Look, obviously you didn't see that fight. Everybody knows Hendricks got robbed.
Let's stick to badminton, pal.
He immediately became emotional and insisted they didn't understand anything, saying he would definitely fight them once he got out. A small hole was finally made in the wall. The medic first gave him saline to stabilize his condition. As the man was getting worse by the second, they threaded ropes through 2 holes and forcefully pulled down the brick wall.
1, 2, 3.
They slowly lowered his legs out and placed him onto a stretcher. But the man hadn't forgotten the firefighters' comments about his idol and still wanted to fight him first.
Oh, I was just messing with you to keep your heart rate up, Gavin.
Sometimes people need a reason to keep going. So what motivates you the most when you're working? The criminal was stabbed by the victim's father in court after failing to tell the truth, but he was still locked in handcuffs and could not move no matter how hard he struggled. The paramedics checked him and found that his lung had been injured. There was a high risk of pneumothorax, and he had to be laid down for treatment immediately. The correctional officer rushed over to unlock the cuffs, but unexpectedly, the key broke inside the lock. The firefighter looked at him in shock. These high-security handcuffs cannot be opened by anyone without the original key, and only the prison can send a replacement. At this moment, the criminal had already lost a large amount of blood. He could not wait for the key to arrive. He might die before that and go see Satan first. The firefighter tried to pry the handcuffs open with a crowbar. He used all his strength, but the cuffs did not move at all. Seeing that he was about to die, they had no choice but to use the last possible method. The firefighter took off his clothes and covered his hands. He first used a fire extinguisher to cool down the handcuffs, then used pliers to forcefully squeeze the connection point. After being released, the criminal had already passed out, and he was quickly sent to the hospital. A homeless man was lying in front of a horse-drawn carriage, shouting at the horse and claiming that his leg had been broken. He said the matter couldn't be settled without $200,000. At this moment, the carriage owner saw the firefighters and blamed them for being so late, saying her business had already been delayed. The firefighters quickly checked the man's injury, and what they saw left them speechless. His leg injury was at least 3 years old. It was clearly a scam. The man kept shouting uncontrollably, but the firefighters did not get angry. Instead, they even treated his injury.
We hope that you'll refrain from yelling at us.
Or suing us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would be good.
Okay, you're all wrapped up there, and it was a pleasure doing business with you.
Best of luck.
Yeah.
After giving him a friendly response, the firefighters left. This completely confused the man. He quickly got up and walked away. It seems that when dealing with different people, you need different approaches. Otherwise, you may end up suffering losses. A paramedic pushed the man onto the ambulance, but the moment she opened his clothes, she froze.
Now I know why this guy's so popular.
No wonder he collapsed in the freezing snow. Just then, several aggressive-looking men rushed over. They clearly didn't look like good people. They threatened the paramedics to hand over the man in the ambulance. The paramedic quickly locked the doors. At this point, the man's pulse was weakening. If he wasn't treated within 2 minutes, there would be no point in saving him anymore. They called dispatch for backup, but police would take at least half an hour to arrive. They might be able to wait, but the man couldn't. And there were still attackers outside. Dispatch told them that if backup couldn't arrive in time, they would have to handle it themselves. One person was told to distract the attackers, while the other slipped out through the front door into the driver's seat. Just as the attackers were about to break in, she started the ambulance and drove off. The men saw the ambulance leaving and immediately got into a car to chase them. Following dispatch instructions, the ambulance hid inside an abandoned scrapyard. The pursuing vehicle drove past without noticing them. But the man in the ambulance was rapidly deteriorating. They quickly made a small opening in the man's leg and set up an IV access point, using intraosseous infusion to keep him stable until they reached the hospital. However, the pursuing vehicle soon came back again, and the attackers opened fire directly at the ambulance. Fortunately, police arrived in time and arrested them on the spot.
Drop the weapon! Drop the weapon! Do it now! Do it now! Don't look at me! Turn around!
Out the car! Don't move!
Turn
Get
around!
out! Both of
Turn
them!
around! Turn around!
Get down!
Face down on the hood! Spread them!
Gabriella Dawson, Ninja Paramedic.
We owe you a beer.